Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. We are back to Estate Planning of the Rich and Famous, where we chat about celebrities and their estate planning, or lack thereof. Today's episode is on none other than Muhammad Ali. It's a name that likely needs absolutely no introduction, but in case someone is listening and happens to have no idea who it is, this is how Wikipedia describes him. He was, quote, an American professional boxer, nicknamed the Greatest. He is regarded as one of the most significant sports figures of the 20th century and is often regarded as the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, end quote. So yeah, he was kind of a big deal, guys, a super big deal. As we always do in these types of episodes, let's talk a little bit about him personally speaking, and then we will end up shifting to what happened estate-wise following his death in 2016. According to Muhammad's Wikipedia page, he was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, a Midwestern kid. I love it. If you didn't know, I'm in Indiana, and I had no idea he was from Louisville initially. So anyway, he started boxing at the super young age of 12. And crazy enough, he won a gold medal at the 1960 Olympics in Rome when he was only 18. So impressive. The next year, in 1961, Muhammad converted in religion and faith to Islam. And clearly at this time of his life, it was just filled with lots of things, lots of changes, because then the very next year, in 1962, when he was 22, he also changed his name. Now, a lot of people know what I'm about to say, that Muhammad Ali was not his birth name. When he was born, he was named Cassius Clay Jr., but he changed it to Muhammad Ali, saying his birth name was a slave name. And before I forget to mention, if you like learning about family history and heritage, you really should check out Muhammad's family history as well as his upbringing and life. This episode took a long time to research because I kept going down rabbit holes, learning about his family and his life. And as faithful Legal Tea listeners know, I usually try to keep these episodes at about 15 minutes in length, but I could have easily spent the entire 15 minutes talking about Muhammad personally and never get into his estate stuff. According to his Wikipedia page, Muhammad was married 4 times and had 9 children. 7 daughters and 2 sons. And for sake of time, I will not go into each marriage and child, about every single marriage, the spouse and all that. But his second marriage brought him his 2 first kiddos. His first kiddos. There were 4. And specifically, those 4 were his oldest daughter, Miriam, twin girls, Jamila and Rashida, and a son, Muhammad Ali Jr. A couple years after Muhammad Ali Jr., there were, his number 5 and number 6, we have Mia, and number 6, Kalia. And both of these came from affairs. In fact, Muhammad Ali Jr. and Mia were born in the same year of 1972. After the infidelity, Muhammad and his second wife divorced, and he ended up marrying a third woman, which brought him 2 additional children, Hannah and Layla, both daughters. So that's children number 7 and 8. That marriage also ended, and he ended up marrying a 4th woman, which is who he stayed married to until he passed away. Now, that marriage brought him his final child, which he and her name's Lonnie, adopted. And his name was a son by the name of Assad. According to his Wikipedia page, in 1984, Muhammad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Thankfully, he remained active, which likely had a positive impact on him and the diagnosis. And kind of a little fact about me personally, I serve on the board of directors for the Indiana Parkinson's Foundation. Transparently, I had no idea that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. Though it makes complete sense because so many programs for Parkinson's individuals involve boxing. So I should have connected the dots, but I honestly never have. Anyway, a few years later, in 1988, He and Michael J. Fox, who had also been diagnosed with Parkinson's, collaborated to raise awareness and raise funding also for a cure. Now, their collaborations continued for many years, including Muhammad working with the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. Starting in 2014, he started really dealing with some additional health issues beyond Parkinson's. Like in December 2014, Muhammad got pneumonia and was hospitalized. In January of 2015, so just that following month, he found himself back at the hospital dealing with a urinary tract infection. Then in June 2016, Muhammad was hospitalized due to a respiratory illness, which ended up kind of, unfortunately progressing and resulted in his death at the age of 74 from septic shock. So now shifting to what happened estate-wise following his death. So for starters, when Muhammad first died, there were reports that his estate was worth somewhere between $50 million and $80 million, which that's a large gap, but nonetheless, as Forbes suggested, quote, that could just be the start. As Entertainment Tonight reported, the value of the champ's fortune could increase dramatically now that he is gone, just as happened with Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, and Whitney Houston, end quote. I did an episode kind of on this note a handful of weeks ago about a publicist that specifically represents deceased celebrities. And one of the things I remember talking about on that episode is sometimes the deceased celebrity is worth just as much, if not more sometimes, than what that celebrity was worth living, which is wild. As I started researching for this episode, I could only find article after article that kept saying that estate disputes would likely happen. Basically saying that between his marriages, his children, the infidelity, etc., that the family, it was just ripe for fighting. One even said something like it was set to be World War III. Well, for a long time, that is all I could find was articles saying fights would probably happen, but I could not find anything about a fight actually happening. And that was kind of my first sign that a fight, was indeed not happening and did not happen, because there would be headlines about the fight. And not that it was just a fight just probably happening, that it was actually happening. Well, I finally found what I was looking for. About a year after Muhammad passed away, of course, like I just said, all these reports were happening that the estate would be fought over, the family would be fighting against each other. Well, those happened, and about a year after he passed away, his daughter, Miriam, just the eldest daughter, hit back at all these reports and denied any fighting, according to Daily Mail. She said, quote, "My father raised me and my siblings to love each other, and that is exactly who we are, very loving people. We are not in any feuds with each other or with our stepmother, Lonnie," end quote. And of note, like I mentioned earlier, Lonnie was his last wife, who he was still married to when he passed away. Miriam continued, quote, "It's unfortunate that there is someone out there submitting stories with so many untrue statements. We try to ignore these articles, but they seem to be never ending, which is sad because I know I have some wonderful siblings that simply want to live peaceful lives. The terms of the trust confidential and is not the business of the people," end quote. There it is. That's what I was looking for. That's why I could not find much about this estate. He had an estate plan likely consisting of a trust, which trusts, as we've discussed on here many times, are settled and handled privately, so long as the beneficiaries don't drag it into court and fight about anything. Now, there are additional reports kind of quote out there about how much each kid got and how much Lonnie got, his widow, but those are just reports. Much like the reports that said that the kids were fighting, who knows if they're true? What I can confirm is I could not find much at all about Muhammad's estate plan. And in my opinion, professional opinion that is, I believe that the fact that he had a trust is likely true since there's whole lot of nothing out there about his estate plan. So what's the big takeaway from this episode and Muhammad's estate plan that, likely involved a trust? Well, to me, I think the biggest takeaway here is the privacy of it. Like I said, I searched and searched and searched for more information about his estate plan and details as, who got what. And there is no solid information out there. There's some reports here and there, but nothing official, nothing really official at all. So we can assume things, like we can maybe assume that Lonnie, his widow, got, a share, and we can assume that his kids probably got a share too. But that would just be assuming, and I try not to do that here on Legal Tea. And you see, that's the beautiful thing about, one, actually doing an estate plan, and two, doing a good estate plan. Things can remain private so long as you put the time, money, and energy into good planning. I often hear from my own clients and prospective clients, Jenny, do we need a trust? Do we have enough assets for a trust? And I always answer it the same way. Trusts are not just for the wealthy, guys. I help a lot of clients get trusts in place, and most of my clients are just everyday people. Instead of how much in assets, I always focus on what is the client's goal. It depends on what they're trying to accomplish as to whether a trust makes sense or not. So, for example, are you just trying to get the bare minimum done right now just to kind of get something in place? Maybe a trust is not needed. Or are you trying to avoid probate? Or are you trying to provide a specific distribution pattern, like say based on age for beneficiaries? Are you trying to gain asset protection? If any of those last few questions are a yes, then maybe a trust does make sense. But as you can see, it's very goal dependent rather than how much you have in assets. So the other big takeaway beyond just that Muhammad accomplished this level of privacy by utilizing a trust is that with the trust, you not only have to have the trust prepared and signed, but there's this whole process after signing the document that happens after that. It's called funding, F-U-N-D as in dog, I-N-G. The funding of a trust means that you are proactively getting assets into the name of your trust, as in like the trust will actually own the asset or possibly make the trust a beneficiary of, various assets. The funding process is what puts the bow on top. Without the trust being funded, it could just be a pile of paper that you may have paid a lot of money for. So if you have a trust, or if you want to trust, be sure the thing gets funded. Any solid estate planning attorney can help you with this conversation, I promise. Alrighty, let's wrap this episode up and shift to a sneak peek of next week. Next week, we're back to a cautionary tale episode where we talk about real-life clients, real-life cases that I or my office have worked on, or maybe they're just generally good things to know or be aware of so that you don't slip up and turn into a cautionary tale one day. Always good stuff on those episodes. So tune in, but until then, Legal Tea listeners, do take care and be well.